Anger wasn't the first thing she felt. It was confusion. Angeline Jackson stood in the school bathroom, her hands gripping the edges of the sink like it might keep her from falling. The mirror showed a girl she almost didn't recognize, wide eyes, cheeks glistening, and half of her head butchered. The water in the sink wouldn't drain. Dark coils of her hair floated there, bloated and lifeless. Behind her, Officer Tisha Carver's reflection leaned against the tiled wall. The woman looked almost pleased with herself. Blonde, uniform crisp, skin pale under the flickering light, she spun the silver scissors in her hand like a toy. "You don't get to bring things in your hair," she said, voice oily and calm. "Could be drugs. Could be weapons. Could be anything." "They're just braids," Angeline whispered, her voice shaking. "Are they?" Snip. Another lock fell. Angeline flinched. "You should be thanking me," Carver went on. "If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear." The last word sliced through the air with the final cut. Angeline stared down at the pieces of herself littered across the porcelain like fallen feathers. Her scalp burned in places. Her pride burned worse. Then came her scream, raw, piercing. A sound that should have brought people running. It echoed once, twice. No footsteps. No help. The bathroom door finally creaked open. Principal Lyman appeared in the frame, eyes darting, mouth tight. He looked. He blinked. He said nothing for 3 full seconds. "I'll deal with this later," he muttered, and left. Carver didn't even look up. Angeline was frozen. She didn't know what came next, only that something inside her had split, louder than her voice, deeper than her fear. Something that would not go quiet again. And what no one in that school knew was that her father wore a badge, too. A bigger one. The phone rang twice. Detective Lieutenant Marcus Jackson sat at his desk in the precinct, sleeves rolled up, reading over a case file that reeked of bureaucracy. He rubbed his temple with the back of his knuckle, not because of the file, but because something had been off since 2:17 p.m. The kind of feeling a parent gets when the silence is too sharp. "Ring." He answered. "Jackson." There was only static at first. Then a voice, breaking, breathless, young. "Daddy?" He straightened. "Angeline?" She didn't speak for a full 3 seconds. When she did, it wasn't a cry, it was a whisper edged with pain. "She cut my hair." The room didn't move, but Marcus felt the world shift. His mind sharpened instantly. "Who?" There was another pause. Then she said the name like it tasted like rust in her mouth. "Officer Carver." Marcus stood up slowly from his chair, as if anything sudden might break the air around him. Across the bullpen, someone called his name, he didn't answer. "She said I could be hiding things," Angeline continued. She smiled while she did it. His grip on the phone tightened. "Where are you now?" "In the nurse's office." "Stay there. I'm coming to get you." He hung up without waiting for more. His heartbeat was steady. Too steady. Controlled in that dangerous way only a veteran cop could manage. He reached for his jacket and his badge. Not the clipped-on ID he wore for meetings. The real one. "Marcus," his captain called out. "Where you going?" He didn't look back. "To clean up a mess." Meanwhile, back at the school, Carver stood outside the main office, leaning against a wall like she had done nothing more serious than write a tardy slip. Principal Lyman paced nervously inside, already composing the email he hoped would make this go away. He didn't know. None of them knew. But Angeline's pain had found the one man in this city who knew exactly how this system worked. And how to burn it from the inside. By the time Marcus Jackson pulled into the school parking lot, the sun was already beginning to lower, a soft orange glare settling across the concrete. He parked right in front of the main entrance. No visitor badge. No check-in. Just the steady click of his boots against the linoleum as he entered the building. Students were gone. Hallways nearly silent. But the air buzzed with something unspoken. The secretary at the front desk stood up. "Sir, Where's my daughter?" His voice was low. Even. Not angry. Not yet. That made it worse. "She's with the nurse," the woman stammered. We called, but there was confusion. Not anymore." He walked past her like she was furniture. The nurse's office was small, too bright. Angeline sat on the edge of the cot, a paper sheet crinkled beneath her. A gauze pad was pressed gently against one side of her scalp. Her braids were tied into a plastic bag, someone's awful attempt at dignity. She looked up. Their eyes met. "Hey, baby girl," Marcus said softly. Tears rushed to her eyes, not because she was still hurt, but because he looked scared. And her father never looked scared. He came closer, knelt down, rested a hand on her knee. "She said she thought I was hiding something in my hair," Angeline whispered. "I know. She cut it without asking." "I know." "And they let her." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once, calm, terrifyingly calm. "Okay." Marcus stood. "What are you going to do?" Angeline asked, voice shaking. He leaned close and kissed her forehead. "Whatever it takes." 10 minutes later. Principal Lyman was still in his office when Marcus opened the door without knocking. "Lieutenant Jackson," he stood up, palms raised, already sweating. "Sit down. I know how this looks." "No. You don't." Marcus stepped inside, shut the door behind him. "What you did today, what you didn't do, has consequences. Listen, I didn't authorize. But you witnessed. And you walked away." Lyman opened his mouth, closed it again. A coward in a blazer. Marcus had seen 1,000 like him. "I want Carver suspended," he said. "Immediately. Pending investigation. I'll need to check with." "Already done. Your school security reports to the city." "And guess who the city reports to?" Lyman blinked. "Me." But outside, Carver was watching. From her cruiser. Eyes narrow. Lips tight. She'd already made one call. She had friends. Powerful ones. And if Marcus Jackson wanted a war, she was ready. By first bell the next morning, the school was no longer just a school. It was a battleground. Students whispered in hallways, scrolling through their phones, showing each other the video. Someone had been filming. Shaky hands. Cracked audio. But the image was clear. Officer Tisha Carver. Scissors in hand. Angeline flinching. The clip was 24 seconds long, and it spread like wildfire. By 8:03 a.m., it was on every major social feed. By 8:15, it was on the local news. By 8:30, the protests had begun. A line of students stood outside the school's main entrance, arms linked, signs raised. "Our hair is not a threat. Justice for Angeline. Protect black girls." Inside, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Teachers exchanged worried glances. The PA system buzzed. And in the front office, Tisha Carver stood in full uniform, still on campus, still smirking. "I'm not going anywhere," she told the principal. "I followed protocol." "Your protocol is a lawsuit waiting to happen," Lyman snapped. His hands trembled as he flipped through emails, all with subject lines in all caps. "I've got legal backing. You remove me now, it sends the wrong message." He hesitated. "The board will want a scapegoat." She leaned in. Then give them the girl. Lyman froze. You want us to say she was aggressive? Say she was hiding something? She's the daughter of a cop. If he pushes this, people will say it's a vendetta. It'll muddy the waters. But what neither of them realized was this. In the hallway outside the office, Marcus Jackson was standing quietly, listening. Later that afternoon, Marcus sat across from Angeline at their kitchen table. The video had played in his mind 100 times. The freeze frame of her face, shock, fear, disbelief, was burned into him. I didn't even know someone was filming, she said softly. You okay with the world seeing it? She nodded. It's not about me anymore. He studied her, truly studied her. Something had changed. She wasn't just the girl who cried in the bathroom anymore. Then we don't stop here, he said. We go public. Press. Lawsuit. Internal affairs. Everything. Will they listen? No. Not at first. But they'll have to hear us. That night, in an anonymous conference room, two men sat across from Carver. One wore a navy suit, the other a badge. You're going to need to clean this up, the suited man said. Fast. Carver lit a cigarette, ignoring the no-smoking sign. I can handle Jackson. You don't need to handle him, the second man said, voice cold. You need to end this story before it becomes a movement. Carver smiled. Then we go after the girl. The note wasn't slipped into her locker. It was folded and taped inside her math textbook, the one she hadn't opened since the incident. A torn corner of paper. Sharp handwriting. No signature. Watch your mouth. Or next time, it won't be just your hair. Angeline stared at it in the back of class, fingers numb. She looked up. No one made eye contact. The room felt suddenly colder. Tighter. Was it a prank? A bluff? Or was someone watching? Across the city, Marcus Jackson was on a call with a civil rights attorney when his other line lit up, internal affairs. He clicked over. Lieutenant Jackson, said a voice like dry paper. We've been asked to open a preliminary inquiry into your conduct regarding Officer Carver. My conduct, he said flatly. There are concerns about you using your position to pressure the school system and manipulate public perception. Let me guess, anonymous complaint. A pause. Then, yes. He laughed once, no humor in it. They were playing dirty. Good. So would he. At school, Angeline walked down the hallway feeling the shift. It wasn't just whispers now, it was sides. Some students nodded at her with quiet respect. Others looked away. A few sneered, and not subtly. She passed one boy, tall, senior, always with a skateboard, who leaned in and muttered. You really trying to get a cop fired over a haircut? She didn't flinch. She stopped walking, turned to face him. You really calling this a haircut? He blinked. She held his gaze. You cut someone's hair without asking. You're either a criminal or a colonizer. Gasps. Someone whispered, damn. The boy backed off, muttering something about overreacting. But Angeline walked away taller. It still hurt. But now it burned clean. That night, Marcus installed a second lock on the front door. Then another on the back. He didn't tell Angeline about the file that had gone missing from his desk. Or the message his car's windshield had scratched into it. Stay in your lane. But what made his blood run cold wasn't the threat, it was how many times he'd seen this play before. Not in textbooks. Not in trainings. In real life. In rooms where people smiled while signing damage into policy. Meanwhile, in a dark room lined with monitors, Officer Tisha Carver scrolled through a file on Angeline. School records. Social media. Medical history. She zoomed in on one photo, Angeline at a school rally from last year, megaphone in hand. She likes attention, Carver muttered. Then she opened a blank document and began typing. Subject, Angeline Jackson, potential gang affiliation. The auditorium was packed. Students filled the seats. Teachers stood along the walls. News crews had set up in the back, lights, cameras, long lenses all pointed toward a single podium. Angeline stood behind the red velvet curtain, palms sweating, phone clutched tight. Her speech was there, typed, clean, precise, but her mind was a storm. Marcus was in the front row. No badge today. Just a father. He gave her a nod, that kind of nod that meant, I've got your back. Say what you need to say. The principal had, graciously, allowed the student forum after relentless pressure from the community. His opening remarks were dry, neutral, spineless. But the moment he said, now, a few words from Angeline Jackson, the room shifted. Whispers rose. Eyes snapped forward. Some in support. Some not. She walked out. Stepped up to the mic. Breathed. I never thought I'd be here because someone cut my hair. A beat. But it wasn't just hair. And it wasn't just a cut. It was permission. Permission to violate, to silence, to punish someone for existing in a body you don't understand. The room was silent. You don't get to tell me what's professional when you see my culture as a threat. You don't get to say it was for safety when the only thing I had on me was dignity, and you took that, too. Phones were out. Cameras rolling. The live stream count ticked upward. I'm 16. I shouldn't be scared of people who are supposed to protect me. I shouldn't have to be brave just to go to school. But if I have to be. She looked directly into the lens of the nearest camera. Then I will be. The room erupted. Applause, cheers, a few boos, but it didn't matter. Her voice had landed. And far beyond that auditorium, people were listening. But not all were moved. Inside a news van across the street, a reporter reviewed an email just sent to their station. Anonymous tip. Subject, Angeline Jackson, violent activist in the making. Attached, a cropped image. Angeline holding a protest sign. The sign was edited. The words distorted. It was a fake. The anchor narrowed his eyes. Run it? The producer hesitated. Let's verify. Too late. It's already viral. Meanwhile, at home, Marcus's phone buzzed. A notification. Search warrant issued. His name was on it. Internal affairs had escalated. They were turning this into a case against him. He looked at Angeline across the living room. She was watching the speech replay on her phone, quietly smiling, not knowing the shadow that was moving in. He didn't want to take that smile away. But he also knew. Tomorrow, everything would change. They came at 6:12 a.m. No knock. No warning. Just fists pounding the door, and voices shouting her father's name like it was a threat. Marcus Jackson. This is internal affairs. Open the door. Angeline sat up in bed, heart already racing. She heard boots. Metal. Her father's voice down the hall, sharp, calm, commanding. I'm coming. Don't break the damn door. She stumbled into the hallway just in time to see 5 officers storm in. 2 wore uniforms. 3 wore suits. 1 held a warrant like it was a weapon. Marcus stepped aside but not back. What's the charge? Misuse of authority. Intimidation. Possible obstruction. Bullshit. No need for aggression, Lieutenant, said the lead agent. He glanced at Angeline. She can stay in her room. I'm not going anywhere, she said. They searched everything. Computers. Files. His badge drawer. Even her room. When one officer reached for her school bag, Marcus stepped in. That's hers. The officer looked at the lead agent. He nodded. Search it. By 7:03 a.m., they were gone. Nothing taken. Nothing found. But something left behind, that invisible stain of power used to punish, not protect. Marcus sat at the table, jaw clenched, eyes empty. Angeline stood across from him, fists curled at her sides. This is because I spoke, she said. He didn't answer. I want to go on the news. Like, really go. Tell them everything. The note. The lies. All of it. Marcus looked at her, long and heavy. They'll come harder next time, he said. Let them, she replied. If I stop now, what was the point of surviving the first time? Later that day, Carver watched the news in her squad car, chewing the end of a pen. The anchor was cautious, dancing around the word racism like it might bite. But Angeline was gaining traction. She needed a distraction. A reversal. Something to flip the narrative before it got out of hand. That's when the call came. I've got something, said a voice. Male. Nervous. It's not big, but I saw her with some guys after school. Ones with records. Carver smiled. That'll do. The next morning, the front page of the Daily Ledger exploded like a bomb. Cop's daughter caught associating with known gang members. Is the victim a threat? A grainy photo. 3 silhouettes in a parking lot. One of them may be Angeline. The story was full of maybes, could bess, and sources close to the investigation. It didn't matter. By second period, teachers were treating her like glass. By lunch, she was trending again, this time under hashtags she didn't choose. Hashtag activist or agitator. Hashtag too loud too soon. And by the end of the day, the principal asked her to stay home for a few days. For safety, he said. Hers or theirs, he didn't specify. That night, Marcus stood in the doorway of her room. They want you to shut up, he said quietly. Angeline sat cross-legged on her bed, laptop open, eyes burning. Then I'll get louder. She clicked record. Hi. I'm Angeline Jackson. You've heard the lies. Let me tell you the truth. The video dropped at 6:01 p.m. Unedited. Unfiltered. Unshakable. Angeline sat in her bedroom, no makeup, no rehearsed lines. Just truth, clean and sharp like broken glass. They called me a threat, she said. Because I didn't bow. Because I dared to be loud in a room built to mute people like me. She told them about the scissors. About the hallway whispers. About the note. She told them about Officer Carver. About the raid. About how silence is never neutral, it's permission. She ended it with a stare into the camera. I'm 16. You tried to take my hair. But what you really wanted was my voice. A pause. Then. You can't have that either. Within hours, it went global. At the precinct, Marcus sat in a side office, watching the view count climb. By the time it hit 2 million, he knew. The department wouldn't be able to contain this. A knock. Captain Rollins entered, tight-faced. She just lit the whole damn city on fire, he muttered. You gonna put it out? The captain hesitated. Then. Carver's being placed on administrative leave. Pending formal investigation. Not good enough, Marcus said. She assaulted a student. Lied to the press. Weaponized a system. Rollins met his eyes. This isn't just a case anymore. It's a movement. Carver watched the video alone. Her jaw twitched. Her foot bounced. Then she grabbed her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in months. "I need help," she said. "It's unraveling." The voice on the other end was calm. "No. It's over." Click. She was alone now. And the system she'd always trusted to protect her was stepping back, piece by piece. The monster always thinks it's invincible, until it isn't. 2 days later. A press conference. Angeline stood beside her father in front of City Hall. Dozens of microphones. Hundreds of people. The mayor announced a full-scale investigation into the school district, the SRO program, and the Internal Affairs Division. Carver's badge was suspended. The principal quietly resigned. But Angeline didn't smile. This wasn't a win. Not yet. It was a beginning. A girl with half her hair. A father who learned his badge could only shield so much. A city that had to decide what kind of silence it wanted to live with. That night, Marcus walked into her room. She was at her desk, scrolling. Still reading comments. Still watching everything. "You okay?" he asked. She turned to him. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "I'm not afraid of mirrors anymore." He didn't say anything. Just nodded. And for the first time in weeks, he exhaled.